Hey guys, welcome back to the Be Better podcast. Matt and I are here with a good friend of ours, Nick Minden, with episode 39. Nick, I just want to say first and foremost, thank you so much for wanting to come on the show. When Matt kind of introduced me to you, and we were able to talk just briefly. We were super pumped to learn more, and you do have an incredible story. And I don't want to ruin anything, but I really believe that our listeners are going to get a lot of value from this. So, without further ado, I mean, please just jump right in and kind of give me the whole rundown of who you are and kind of what makes you tick.
Sure. So yeah, my name's Nick. I'm a lot of things. I'm a father of three boys. I have a little girl that's, they spread out. They're 5, 7, 11, and I have a 8-year-old little girl. I've been in recovery for, uh, 4 years. I've been around recovery most of my adult life. I've been in business for myself for 6 years. I've opened 5 sober living homes, and just done a ton of work in the community with trying to help people and be a resource and be a light. And just I'm very active in the recovery field, and also in as far as I'm a masonry contractor. We do a ton of historic masonry restoration, do a lot of new construction brickwork. We've got our hands in a lot of different stuff, and I feel like this year especially we have made a huge impact and are really moving in a good direction. So, but yeah, I mean, above all that, most importantly, like my name is Nick, and I'm an addict in recovery.
Yeah, so I appreciate that little quick rundown. So let's take it back to the beginning, the addict part. So
Sure.
obviously, you said you run a successful business now. You've been clean for many many years. What kind of I'd say let's start where how did the addiction start? What was the factors that kind of led that to happening?
Sure. I mean, so I started using at a very young age. Like I used drugs for the first time I was 11 years old, and just started out drinking and smoking pot. And by the time I was 13 in middle school, I had done cocaine. I had taken LSD. I had eaten mushrooms and ecstasy on the weekend. And when I started high school, by the time I was a freshman in high school, I had an everyday crack cocaine habit. Uh, was selling drugs and stealing and lying and cheating and manipulating and hustling in the street. Ripping people off and just ripping and running to supply that habit. And I picked up heroin for the first time when I was 14 as well, freshman in high school. And I used, and you name it, I used it, right? Like there wasn't anything that was off that was untouchable, that I didn't want to do. That it was anything that would make me feel better than the way that I did. And there was my dad was killed on my 17th birthday in high school. And it was one of those things. I was just a young kid. I'd already kind of went down a kind of narrow path that wasn't, it was kind of out of the ordinary for a high school kid, right? And so when my dad was killed, that was one of those things where like I was forced to deal with a real life like traumatic event like that. It was an adult thing, right? And I didn't know how to cope with it. I didn't understand it. I was in a lot of emotional, spiritual turmoil, and ultimately, like, I remember the summer my dad died. I was heavy drinking and taking Xanax and just blacking out all the time, and so much emotional pain, and I didn't understand anything that was going on. And eventually I started at 17 years old, I stuck a needle in my arm for the first time, and that was it. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for the escape from the pain that I was feeling. And so from 17 to 19, I was shooting heroin every day. Like I had got I had got some money from a settlement and a lawsuit from when my dad was killed, and like it allowed me to use drugs. And I just kept going and going and going and going, and I burned through about $100,000 in 2 years shooting heroin, and ultimately ended up in prison at 19 years old.
That's That's absolutely crazy, brother. So I'm not a doctor here or a psychologist by any means, but what it seems like is the trauma of you losing your dad. Obviously you not knowing the right coping skills or just even the right having the right support system to help you work through that. As a young kid, 17, your brain's not fully developed. You're not thinking clearly. You
Yep.
just know, hey, I'm in a lot of pain. This, whatever it is, right? Drugs, alcohol, sex, anything that can be addictive takes the pain away, gives me a dopamine sense of relief, right?
Yep.
So you
Yep.
just double down because you need that sense of relief, right? So
Yep.
basically, it all stemmed from a tragic event in the family that pushed you through all the way to basically the downward spiral, right?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
where it really kind of went down from there. I mean, like I said, I had already I'd been using drugs and I'd been experimenting with this, experimenting with that, while everybody else was going to high school football games, we were
Yep.
out,
Yeah.
eating ecstasy and getting drunk all weekend.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about like your nuclear family. I know you mentioned your dad. What about your mom? And did you have any other siblings? What's your support like back then?
So I do, me and my mother, um, never really seen eye to eye, right?
Hmm.
Um, Even today, we're better than we have been in a long time, right? But we never saw eye to eye. And I mean, my mom, she wanted what's best for me, but where I was, right? Like, my mom, she would ransack the house, and like I said, I sold drugs too, so to supply my habit and get high and make money, and that's how I survived out there, right? And my mom would find drugs all over the house, flush them down the toilet, and so it was like she knew where I was at. She didn't really know, how to, because my parents knew that I was using, right? It wasn't like some secret. It wasn't some, it wasn't something that they were like totally unaware of. They knew I was using drugs, and they would find drugs all the time. And so, me and her really butted heads a lot. We never seen eye to eye. We really had a hard time. There was never like a close personal relationship. There was never a mother son relationship. It was always like mom versus Nick, right? And I do have a little sister, and we're very, very, very close even to this day. Like, me and my little sister are, uh it's been me and her, you know what I mean? And even when I was like out there strung out, like hurting, just fucked up, like I always tried to, like, if she needed something, be there for her, or just be her brother, right? And so I was kind of like the quote unquote man of the house. So I did everything that I could to just try to be there for my sister, despite all the shit that I was going through. And then, I've got an older brother too, and he's like 20 years older than me. He was a child from my dad's first marriage. So again, he's 20 years older than me. We never lived in the same house. We never were really, really close. Like, when I was growing up, he would like take me to hockey games and shit like that. But it was never like we had like a personal close relationship.
So, what about the relationship with your mother now? Is it still not where it needs to be?
It's tough, right? It's one of those things where she has her issues still, right? And she deals with them the way that she deals with them. And she doesn't seem to want to, and I understand, right? Because as a using addict,
Hmm.
we often hurt the people that love us the most,
Sure.
right? And we hurt them the worst. Like no mother ever wants to experience their child going to prison, right? No mother ever wants to experience finding needles in their house. No mother ever wants to experience finding crack pipes hidden in the ceiling. No mother ever wants to experience finding $10,000 cash from a 16-year-old boy and wondering where the fuck this came from, you know.
Sure.
Wow.
And so she has a hard time letting it go and moving forward, and we work on it, right? We do our best. I'm not saying we have a great relationship, but it's better than it has been, right?
a working relationship, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me say this to you, and hopefully this gives you a little word of, encouragement. So, like, I'm 28, right? I know you're a little older than I am, but I'm 28,
Hmm.
and my mom is in her 40s, and we never, for years, I mean, since I was a kid, never saw eye to
Hmm.
eye. She was an addict for a long time. I resented her, hated her, didn't see
Hmm.
her for years. Ran away, got adopted by other family members, all this mess, right?
Hmm.
I
Yep.
mean, me and my mom did not see eye to eye, and I will tell you, I don't know what necessarily event could happen in your life that might change this, but when I had my daughter myself just a couple months back, and like even I'd say probably about 9 months ago, my
Hmm.
mom has really turned over a new leaf, and she's really trying to basically make up for lost time. And she's just
Sure.
been a fantastic mom to me since that.
Yep.
She kind of
Yep.
had a realization like, hey, I was a really bad parent, and she's
Yeah.
made a complete turnaround. She's been super, super, helpful, and despite how much I resented her early, she is my mom at the end of the day, and that's a unbreakable bond no matter what, right? So
100%.
my point being is, she turned into a great mom and a great grandmother, right? So
Hmm.
my hope for you is that you'll experience something very similar, maybe when you guys have another life-changing event in the positive way, right?
Hmm.
But maybe that will be that wake-up call for her as well, and you guys can reconcile and move forward together. That's my hope and prayer for you guys. I never anticipated it happening for us, but I mean, I'll tell you, brother, since it has happened, I've been so forever grateful to, you know, have my mom on my side. You know what I mean? It's one
Yeah.
of the best
Yeah.
feelings in the world. So I hope and
Yeah.
pray that happens to you.
I appreciate that. And I make the effort, right? I make some effort, like here and there, because again, I'm at this now. I'm like super busy all the time, building businesses and
Right.
you know doing all the things and being an adult and just taking care of my own kids and doing all this stuff. You know what I mean? So, but from time to time, I do my best to reach out and just try to touch base and say, hey, do you want to just go grab something to eat? Right. And it
Yeah.
starts with simple acts like that.
That's all it takes, man. And who knows if that's going to be the catalyst that leads to, the best and most beautiful relationship out there, right? Who knows? But it's worth a shot. So let's segue into the next portion here. So we obviously heard about the background of being an addict.
Yep.
Every addict, before they can make a recovery, has to hit rock bottom. So where was your rock bottom moment, and then how did we work towards recovery?
So, like I said, I went to prison when I was 19, and I had been to treatment centers. I went to treatment twice, to detox and get off of heroin, right? And it was just like the most miserable thing it was so miserable, right? Um, and this was back before they did all the MAT and all that kind of shit. Like I did the old fashioned like detox, right? And and I like started going to 12-step meetings and like kind of heard some things, right? But ultimately, like I just wasn't ready, right? And I ended up in prison at 19 years old, and that saved my life, right? Like it saved my life because it sat me down long enough to make a decision. It sat me down long enough to take a good, hard, realistic life at where I was and where I wanted to go. And to be honest, like, I had so much things to work out on the inside. Like I had so much trauma and I had so much anger and I had so much resentment and hate and all this stuff because of what I had been through losing my dad, right? And so I started to work on some of these things, and I started to figure out how to have a relationship with God. And I started to figure out how to let go of that anger and resentment. And like one of the things that I did to let that go is I had to figure out how do I forgive the person that killed my father? How do you do that? Right? Because I didn't know. I never had to go through something like this. I never had no proper guidance. I never had somebody who was able to really teach me things like this. So I figured it out in the jail with it was me and God, right? And I started praying about it, uh and I wrote the guy who had killed my dad. And at the time he got sentenced to 15 years, uh and he was doing time in Bowling Green, and I was sitting in Bonne Terre. And after I started praying, and having this relationship with God, like it came to my attention that, the cell that I was sitting in, it closed at the same time his did, and the size, the 9 by 6 cell that I was in, he was sitting in the same size cell. And so it helped me understand, man, that everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does shit that they aren't proud of. Everybody does things that they regret. Everybody has to live with their choices, man. And I know for a fact that he had made some mistakes, and in order for me to heal from that, I needed to let go and forgive him, right? And so
Yeah.
that's where it started. I wrote this letter and I sent it off to Bowling Green, and just wrote this sincere letter and said, "Hey, I forgive you, right? Do with this letter as you please. You can keep it, you can throw it. I don't care what you do with it. But after I send it out of Bonterre, it ain't mine no more."
That's
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 impressive.
really
Wow.
that's really strong, man. Because I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of times, people in order to hit the next step in their own personal, they need that sense of closure, right? And closure could come in 1,000 different facets, right?
Yeah.
It could
Yep.
be sending a letter and saying, "Hey, I forgive you for causing me the most significant pain a human can have," right?
Yep.
Or it could be closure of just, I mean, there's 1,000 different ways to do that, right? But I do think that's really, really important what you've done, and I think it probably gave you a lot of sanity back.
Yep. Absolutely.
And closure, right?
Absolutely. Because I didn't deal with it properly when it happened, right? Like I just went straight to using drugs and drinking. And that's
Right.
how I dealt with it. So I never really had that closure. And like, I remember the night that he died, I was at the hospital. It was my birthday. I was out drinking and, taking Xanax, and I had swallowed a bunch of pills, and like, I didn't even know what happened the next day. I woke up out of my blackout and I didn't even know what happened. And I woke up, it was like 4 in the afternoon, and my sister was standing there crying, and she was like, "Do you even know what happened?" And I had no clue. I had no idea. You know
My
what I mean?
goodness.
Man. Oof.
I had no
That's
idea.
so brutal. That's so absolutely brutal. I can only imagine the just the sense of failure that you probably felt. Like my father's dead. My sister doesn't even, she has nowhere to go but me, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I can only imagine the sense of just how fucked that is and how terrible and hard that must have been. And obviously, I'm sure years later, right, you probably do have a sense of regret um, in that moment. But obviously, you've made some tremendous strides to obviously mediate that, right? So I mean, it's remarkable. So going down the line, right? So you're in prison. You obviously get your closure there, which is a grace from God.
Yep.
Um, moving down the line, so you're pretty much in the dry out period because you're in jail. There's no way for you to get access to drugs. I mean, there is, but you're not
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
direct access to drugs.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so tell me more about the recovery route.
So like I was locked up for about a year, and I got out, and then like I started going back to meetings, right? And I got involved with meetings, and I started I got a sponsor right away, and I started working with the sponsor. I started working steps, and I was a 19-year-old kid. I didn't have any skills. I had no job. I had nothing going on. I didn't have anything to do. I had no bills. I had no responsibilities, right? Like, so it was like I had the world at my fingertips. I could figure out, I could do and be whatever it is that I wanted to be, right? But first things first, I had to figure out how the fuck to stay clean, you know? And so I started working steps with a sponsor. I started bringing meetings into treatment centers, and I started getting involved and going to conventions, NA functions, and started, and 1 year turned into 18 months, and 18 months turned into 2 years, and 2 years turned into four, and four turned into five, and like, I had my first kid at 21, and found a career path, right? Like I started working with Bricklayers Local One, and so I did an apprenticeship with Bricklayers Local One, and I had a good fucking job, and was making good money, and working on the side, and making more money than I'd ever made, and had a pension and retirement, and and had this nice boat, and bought a house, and like just all the things, right? Like lost dreams awakened and new possibilities arise. And like I was having fun, you know what I mean? I was like living this amazing life,
Yeah.
man. I was living an amazing life. And like I just I was and after 6.5 years of being clean and living right and doing the deal and sponsoring people and speaking at conventions and traveling all over the country to go to speak at Chicago and Florida and Philly and here and there and all these places, like doing all these amazing things and helping so many people, I decided that maybe it was possible I could drink again.
Mm.
All right. And after 6.5 years of being clean and living an amazing and building an amazing life, I decided that I could drink again. And I did. And I did. And I just drank and smoked pot, and I thought that I had figured it out. I wasn't doing I wasn't bottomed out, smoking crack, shooting heroin, I wasn't doing any of that stuff. And I started a business and was like traveling the country, snowboarding and having fun and going to Hawaii and doing all this shit, you know what I mean? And like from the outside looking in, because I was like working and had this business and was traveling and snowboarding and Nick's in Hawaii again, Nick's doing this, Nick's doing that, da da da. Like from the outside looking in, it looked like I may have figured out how to drink successfully, right? But for an addict like me, there's no safe or successful use of drugs. You know what I mean?
I feel like it's a slippery
You're
slope, right? Slippery slope back down that spiral to fucking death and doom, right? I mean, I'm the same way. I never really had addiction problems per se, but like I loved to drink, right? And I haven't drank in over 3 years. And I used to
Mhm.
love to drink. I'd be a weekend warrior. I'd go out with the buddies every weekend, Sunday or
Yep.
Friday, or excuse me, Saturday or Friday night, and we'd go get obliterated, right? It wouldn't be like, hey, Nate's gonna have 2 beers. It's like, hey, Nate's gonna drink until he fucking passes out, right?
Right. Right.
And I had those days where I would I would essentially wake up like you did, not knowing what the hell happened, not knowing was it a good night? Did I hurt somebody? Did I get hurt? Like what? Where the
Right.
hell is $300 missing out of my wallet? Where the hell did that go? Right? Like it's
Right.
and I realize as well that I'm never going to be that guy that can go out with his buddies and have one beer at dinner and call it quits.
Yep.
And it's better for me just to remain completely abstinent from the whole thing because that's just how my body's wired, right? And I think you feel the same way. I mean, our body, we're predisposed to really love having a good time.
Well, I love it.
Yeah.
It's
And
not
we
that
got
it
to
wasn't fun.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it definitely was. It was a ton of fun, right? But in the reality of, what's important here, I
Yep.
look at my life now like similar to yours, right? I mean, I've been married a year. We got a baby. We have a house. We're building a new house. We both have
Yep.
successful careers. Like,
Yep.
I wouldn't trade this for all the alcohol in the world, right? Like,
Absolutely.
there's not a chance. So I
Right.
understand exactly where you're coming from. So
Yeah.
going forward, past your road to recovery, right?
Yep.
So obviously now I don't want to say unbelievably because it happens, but you are unbelievably involved in recovery community.
Right.
So tell me a little bit more about some of the things you're active in and kind of what you do.
Yeah. So, like when I got sober again, ultimately I ended up going down a rough path again for about a year and a half. And I was strung out again, smoking crack, and then I bottomed out and got clean. And I ended up in jail again in October 10th, 2020 is when I got sober again. And I ended up in jail, and this time they didn't let me out, right? Like I had to sit there for a month, and again it was just long enough for me to think about where I was and where I wanted to go, man. So I started rebuilding my life, man, one thing at a time, right? I had multiple felony charges. I had lawsuits all over the place. I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't have a driver's license. My house was in foreclosure. My credit score was 480. You know what I mean? Like I literally had nothing. I had nothing. But what I did have above everything, above and bigger than all of those things that I just mentioned, all the lawsuits and felonies and this and that, I had a clean date. And because of that clean date, I was able to rebuild the foundation of my life, man. And so, like obviously when I was using, I was like, I was taking advantage of people, right? Like I would start a job, they'd give me a bunch of money and then I'd run off or whatever, right? And so I had to rebuild my name in the construction industry. And nobody wanted to hire me in the beginning because everybody was like, watch out for that guy, he'll take off with your money, And and so I had to just come in and stay clean, right? I had to put it out into the open because this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. This is who I was, and this is who I really am, right? And so I stood on my own 2 feet, and I stood up, and I owned all my mistakes, and the people that I had ripped off, I started paying them back one payment at a time, and I started doing good work. Started, with the brickwork, I started doing good work for people again, one job at a time. You know what I mean? And after a while, it's like I had so much stuff to pay, so many things to fix, and all this stuff, right? And like I just kept trudging through it, right? And I remember I didn't even have a vehicle, and I would rent U-Haul trucks to move my equipment around, and so like I just kept trudging and barreling through, and kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going, and like no matter how I felt, I just kept going and kept going, right? And you know, like I eventually I got out of the hole, man, and I got out of the hole, and I started like, I started to profit from the business instead of just pay everything off. And it's like, okay, what do I do? Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Right. And so I was like, I wanted to get involved with real estate. I didn't know what to do with real estate, but I had an extensive background in construction. So I was like, I guess I'll flip this house. I guess I'll flip this house, man. And I was gonna make like 80 grand on this house, man. But I had kicked around the idea of doing sober living. And I was like sitting in this house. It was renovated, it was done, it was beautiful house, man. And I sat in that house and I was sitting on the couch in it, and I was praying, I prayed about it, and I said, God, what do you want me to do with this house? What do you want me to do with this house? Because it would have been real easy to take that $80,000 and be up. But I knew that that house had the opportunity to change so many lives. And so I started with one, I started with one. And I didn't even have the credit score to refinance. So I had to bring in a credit partner to buy the house with. Right? So we could refinance and get the loan in their name because I didn't have the credit.
Right.
And that was the birth of the sober living thing.
It's absolutely fucking crazy. And now you have what? You're working on your sixth?
I just bought the sixth one yesterday. We're about to start renovating it next week.
Dude, congratulations. That's insane. That's crazy.
Like and we opened the first one September of last year.
Wow. So with you having all these homes, how does one find, or do you have to like vet certain people to get in there? How does that work?
So, we opened the one, and like again, I'm very well known in the like I'm not gonna say I guess I am. Yeah, I guess I am. Yeah. I'm very well known I've been around the recovery community since 2010. So that's 14 years I've been in the recovery community. So I know a lot of people. And all I did was open my mouth and say, hey, I'm opening sober living houses. Hey, I'm opening sober living houses. And this person told that person. And that person told the next person. And that next person told the next person. And the next person told the treatment center. And the treatment center told this treatment center. And then that treatment center told that outpatient facility. Then the outpatient facility told St. Louis City Drug Court. St. Louis City Drug Court wants to have a meeting with me. And I'm like, are you sure?
I paid off everything.
Yeah, I was like, man, what? Whose PO is this? You know, I'm not on parole anymore.
Right. You got the wrong guy now.
Yeah. And then but I went in and I sat down with the whole commission of drug court, right? Like the commissioner of drug court, the person in charge of the entire division of St. Louis City Drug Court, and all their counselors and peers and all these people. And I sat down and I said, my name is Nick, and I'm with Second Chance Recovery House. And the reason I called it Second Chance Recovery House is because, man, I had a great life before, and I damn near lost my life because I decided to use again. I mean, I was suicidal, hopeless, like so suicidal, man. I was so suicidal when I was using, you know, and I survived that. Like I wanted to commit suicide every day. And it's like when you battle with addiction and mental health, it's scary.
The bad combination.
It's so scary. And you don't know what a person is capable of, especially when they're by themselves. And I know what it's like to be in that absolute total desperation. And I want to provide as much opportunity to people and show people that you could be and do anything that you want, but you will only get out of this life what you are willing to put in.
I completely agree 110%. Do you have, I'm just curious now for my own sake, because you pretty much have your sixth house done here for recovery. Do you have a rough idea of how many people you've saved so far?
So we have right now with those 5 houses, 40 beds. We have 40 beds for our sober living organization. And with the 6th one, when it's done, we'll have 49. So that's 49 people in our organization that are all given the same opportunity to change their life. And we've had several people come in. I just like right now, right now, we have a guy, man. He got out of prison in January, and this is a guy that I've known for years, man. And he has been in and out of prison. I mean, he's probably spent more than half of his adult life in the Missouri Department of Corrections, right? And he got out this time, and he came to our program, and I gave him a job, and I taught him a skill, right? I taught him enough, like with the masonry trade, and he took what I taught him, and now he's got a career path. He went and joined the Bricklayers Union. He's got a career path. He's like getting ready to get his own place, right? And he has just like thrived, man. For the first time in his life, he is doing all of the things that he was supposed to be doing.
And you gave him a purpose.
I mean, God gave me one.
It's a blessing, man.
I mean, also too, I think you just planted the seed, right? You planted the seed of success in that person, and then it blossomed, right? I mean, it's that simple. You gave that person the opportunity, right? And then they seized the opportunity, and it just grew like wildfire from there. And sometimes that's all it takes, right? Sometimes all it takes is somebody just to lend that person an ear to listen, or maybe a helping hand, or just point somebody in the right direction.
Yep.
So how do you what do you do? Because people in these situations, they lie, steal, manipulate, like you said. How do you, I don't know, like prepare for that just in case? Like, how do you guys have conversations? Do you guys
So the way that our program is structured is there's in-house managers. There are guys that are also in recovery that live on site. They're drug test, they drug test the other residents regularly at random. There's house meetings. We have a point system, right? And like, you can be put on restriction. Like if you get so many points in the matter of 2 weeks, right? Like if because it's all simple, basic human living skills, right? Like, they're signed. There's a chore board written inside the house, and it's just right on the wall, and it's a rotating thing, right? And Mr. Such and Such cleans the bathroom today. you clean the kitchen tomorrow, you mop and sweep the floors this day, right? And it's like all like just a basic accountability chart. And so like, if they get a certain amount of points, like if they're lying, or if they're past curfew, or if they, whatever, right? Like there's a whole list of things, and you can be assigned points, and ultimately you can be asked to leave, right? And there's no tenant rights with it. And, like they sign that off when they come in the house. And so we don't have to give you an eviction notice. All we got to do is tell you, you got 1 hour to pack your stuff and go. And the reason we do that, right? And that's how it is with most recovery houses. And the reason is
accountability.
If you ain't serious, there are plenty of people out there dying for an opportunity, man. There are plenty of people who
I would completely agree. I mean, like I said before, I think sometimes people just need that spark to push them in the right direction, and that lending hand, to help them in their next step of recovery, because people feel trapped. And people don't just feel trapped; they're lost, right? They have no fucking clue what's the first step to getting recovery, right? Okay, first step, not using. Yeah, easier said than done, right? So, it's more so, what can I do to, ensure that this is not going to happen again, where I'm going to slip up and bad things will happen, right? So these treatment houses that you're offering to people, right? I don't know. I'm not sure if you're at capacity just yet or not, but if you do get an opening, what's the best way people can find you?
So, our numbers are all over the place, like my significant other, Hannah, she helps me run it. We've got an intake coordinator, they can reach out that way. We're, I don't know. We haven't even had to build a website or anything yet. We're working on building a website, and, we've got a Facebook page built that we just put together. And, pretty much like our numbers are just out there in a public forum, man. And our numbers are out there. And if anybody is trying to get into the program, they just call us directly and we schedule an intake. We do an interview. We have an interview process. We get to know who you are and what your needs are and all those kind of things before we do the intake, so that we know, what it is exactly that you need and how we can help.
I absolutely love to hear it, man. I love to hear it. Do you have an official name? Oh, you Second Chance, right? So that's
Second Chance Recovery House.
Obviously, people can just Google that and it should pop up.
We're not on Google yet. We're in the process of building the website. So,
okay.
It's in the works, but we do have a Facebook page. You know what I mean? The way to get in touch with us. If you look up Second Chance Recovery House, we're out there on Facebook, and you can get in touch with us through there.
Do you guys go through hospitals as well?
We do work with some of the hospitals, like like Barnes Jewish. Like when somebody overdoses, there's a team of people that, like, if they come in from an overdose, this group of individuals will come in and say, they'll just have a conversation with you. It's called the Epic team, is what it is, and they'll come in and they'll say, what do you want to do from here? And that's when, the Epic team has all the resources, right? Like whether it be for places for people, or Archway, Gateway, there's all kinds of different resources out there for people that are struggling with addiction and mental health.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's just such a remarkable the story that we just heard, and as well as the fact that now you're offering to render aid to other people that need it. I mean, it's absolutely the way to do it, right? You figured out a plan, you busted it out, and then now you're replicating success with other people. I mean, that's the recipe for for ultimate, ultimate grace, in my opinion.
Yeah. And we've got some cool stuff in the works for 2025, man. I mean, we're just starting. You know what I mean? Like six houses sounds huge, but we're just getting going. It's only been a year. You know what I mean? And
imagine what you're going to do when you scale, right? Whenever 6 turns to 16, then to 36, right? Then to 56, then to 106. I mean, it's just gonna grow and scale from there. I mean, I definitely see the vision there, and I think the more people that can get into a good environment that's going to allow them to beat this, the better, right? I mean, it's much better than people dying in quick trip bathrooms. So
absolutely, because it happens every single day.
Oh yeah,
every day,
more than you could think.
Yep.
Oh, you're not kidding. Nick, from the bottom of my heart, I know Matt feels the same way. I just want to appreciate you and say thank you so much again for coming on and telling us your story and kind of your vision and offering such an incredible resource to people of addiction that need help, right? That are working their road toward recovery, but maybe at the same time, they're unsure of that next step. Um, Whenever we get done here in just a second, I'm going to make sure that Matt and I get the link to
Sure.
whatever your Facebook page. And um,
Absolutely.
obviously, guys out there, to all the viewers out there that are listening, if you or somebody you know is struggling with recovery and needs kind of a little spice up in the right direction, we'd be happy to give you Nick's contact info. I mean, don't know if he's got a bed open for you, but I promise you he'd be an open ear to, maybe walking you through some guidance and giving you some perspective. So, I mean, it'd be worth it if you are having an issue. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brother.
Thank you. Thank you.
Guys, this is the end of the episode here. As we promised, we are going to put all of Nick's links that he wants in there so you can get access to them, get some help if you need it. By God, guys, there's more people every day dying from fentanyl and other drug-related overdoses. It's not safe anymore to be an addict. It's not safe anymore to even just experiment. If you can, obviously do your best to avoid getting in front of these influences. But if you are at the point where you do need help, there's plenty of resources out there, guys. Nobody needs to die alone. Nobody needs to have a family member die. We can prevent this, all of us together. I know for a fact. So, thank you guys so much for joining us. Nick, thanks again for coming on, brother. And Matt, obviously, pleasure doing this with you. Thanks you for joining us for episode 39.
Thanks, guys.